Hello and welcome to the Council and Trade Union Joint Committee. Before we start, can I say that the chairing arrangements for this municipal year pass on to the council side, but Peter Mason, Councillor Mason, is absent today, unfortunately, and therefore I'm chairing this committee meeting. Should we start off by apologies for absence? So what we've got is we've got Peter Mason, and I'm sure Keith will supply you with a number of people who are sending their apologies as well for the minutes.
I have no other apologies, so I'm not aware of anybody else that isn't coming. But okay.
Councillor Bassam Mahfouz sent his apologies in an email to me this morning.
Thanks, Andrew.
I certainly know that Danny Judge and Adam Smith have sent their apologies as well.
Oh.
Okay, item 2, urgent matters. Are there any? No? Good. Declaration of interest. I don't think anyone needs to declare anything, do they? No? Okay, great. There's no matters to be considered in private. So we'll go straight into the minutes of the meeting, which was held on Tuesday, the 8th of November, which was some time ago. So those with good memories can pick up any issues and items as they arise. So should we take them page by page, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15, page 16, and lastly, page 17. I wasn't just zipping through them, I was waiting for someone to come up, but Mary, you want?
Yeah, just to say that we didn't have many matters arising from the minutes because I think all of the points are on the agenda anyway. So there's changes and we've moved on quite a lot since the minutes and things like that. But I did want to put it on record that this is the first meeting for 6 months because we agreed to the proposal to not go ahead with the last meeting. So it is a bit disappointing that again, we gave away on that one because I believe it was Councillor Mason wasn't available on that date specifically, and he's not here again today. I just want it put on record. I think it's important, these meetings, and we should prioritise them a bit more. And I agree that's from our side as well, because we're very badly attended as well, and that we should all make more of an effort to attend.
I'm sure all sides will heed what you've said, Mary. So good. So we can agree the minutes of the last meeting and sign those. Let's move straight into the employee side items. And the first one up is update on council proposals, change and structural review. Any other initiatives and plans going forward? We're aware that in certain areas, there are some structural changes, particularly in where Darren Hennigan's area as the interim is at present, and he has undertaken a high-level review of assistant directors and heads of service, and we've been going through the consultation process, and that process has now finished. However, there is a frustration from our side in terms of what is happening below the heads of service level, because unfortunately, we don't really like the top slicing reorganization approach, because that puts a lot of uncertainty and anxiety onto people's shoulders, because they're thinking, well, where do I sit in this reorganization? If I'm further down, if I'm a team leader or an officer, where do I fit into this organization? Is there a role for me? Is there a job for me going forward? So this top slicing approach doesn't really help unless you do a complete review of the complete service, so that people know where the roles are, how many jobs are available, and which areas people will be covering. So it'll be certainly better. And I think this is a recommendation going forward, because we can't take back what's happened in terms of Darren's reorganization. It's certainly something that we'd be pushing for strategic directors and the chief executive to be aware of, which is, let's not just have a slice by slice approach. Let's have an overview of the whole directorate, so that people can hopefully have some certainty and a guarantee that they've got a job going forward, as opposed to not knowing. So that anxiety doesn't help with the morale of staff at all, because it's like, well, I don't know if I'm going to be here in 3 months' time or 4 months' time. Darren's leaving in a couple of weeks' time. Nikki is coming in very shortly. So, you know, it seems a bit of a hodgepodge to me, if I'm honest. And I'm being polite when I use those terms. So.
You need to use the microphone, Sue.
We haven't anticipated wholesale change right the way across. I think there was a need, having sorted out the level of strategic directors. And I know that Darren has been working very closely with Nikki, so there won't be any further change when she comes in. We're not anticipating wholesale change below that we think probably things will remain pretty much as they are. So I don't think we're anticipating a lot further change. So I think that's why you've not seen anything, because I don't think it's going to happen. So let's not sort of set hairs running where nothing is going to happen.
Certainly be helpful. Sorry, I'm wrong. Get this wrong as well. It'd certainly be helpful if that were to be communicated throughout the organization, which is there's not going to be wholesale change, and that people will remain where they are. There might be some slight movement in terms of who you're reporting to, but the jobs are secure. I think that's important. Mary had her hand up, so it's.
So I hear what you say, Sue, and there's an element that was relayed to us, but it wasn't confirmed to us that was what was happening. And so for many of the staff, for many of our members who are raising their questions, they are being managed by people who their posts have been deleted and they have not been appointed into the next level up post that's been created. So those people are completely unclear about exactly what is going to happen. And when we've asked the questions, can you clarify which teams are going to report into which head of service? That hasn't been answered and things like that. So that has left that uncertainty that even if you're a team and you know that your manager's post has been deleted, you're still going to be a team and you're still going to go that way. They don't even know that much information. So it has been massively there. We understand also about the need that they had to do something urgently because of the social housing regulator and things like that. And there was a dreadful need, but we've been saying that for about 4 years. So it's massively frustrating when people come to us and say, oh, we've decided, and we went, well, 4 years ago we knew the structure was wrong and we raised all of those concerns and everybody ignored us, and you wait for it all to kind of collapse and things, and for our members to get very frustrated. But that hasn't been communicated well, and I do think that if you're only doing one level, you have to understand that the people below it. And then I noticed that Darren said some comment, people haven't commented on it. Well, they don't know whether to comment on it because they don't know whether they're affected or not. So if you only give that little bit of information, people comment on what little information, or should they comment on what is the vision? And I think if he'd have expressed what his vision was a bit more, on what he thought he was leaving to hand over to the next person, then people would have been a bit more assured by it, but that wasn't how it was done.
Steve's been patient.
No, I'll just acknowledge that and say that we'll feed that back.
Yeah, I don't want to get embroiled in a particular area, but I think worth making some general points of principle. One, I don't think it would be fair to say that as an organisation that we could be accused of going around chucking jobs away. That's not been what we've done. It's not been a priority. I think our record stands on that. We've had a major restructure at the very top. The 6 strategic directors have been brought in with a view to identifying the correct organisational design in each of those areas. They're all experts in their field, but none of them claims to be all-knowing about all aspects of everything they do. So they, in turn, are ensuring that they have the right people in place at the next level to help build the correct design, and so on and so forth. And I recognise that there's going to be an element of uncertainty for some of our people in some of these areas, and it's our job to minimise that and get things done as quickly as possible. But it's also our job to get the design right. And the truth is that this will always almost come from the top, because each strategic director will build a team of assistant directors who will build a team of heads of service and each of those management chains will work to create the right structure and the right design for the work areas that the council prioritises moving forward. And those things will change because we do things today that we hadn't heard of 10 years ago, and we don't do things very much that we used to do a lot of 10 years ago. That's the nature of life. It's the nature of life in a council business. So recognise the need for us to be sensitive to the impact of organisational change, but that is, for at least the time being, a world that we're going to be living in, and not only in that particular directorate.
Thanks, Steve. What I would say is that we are disappointed, and I'm not suggesting that you as a Labour group are chucking away jobs, but there have been 4 displacements. So there are 4 people who are going to be made redundant unless they are redeployed. So I just needed to put that out there. And I'm just, wondering how that fares with our EDI ambitions as well, because of, the particular makeup of the individuals as well. So obviously you don't know the detail and you may wish to go away and look at it. Is there anything else on item 1? Mary?
So what are the other proposals, and when will we know more? Because we can't believe that there isn't going to be more change. And, you just said, that's, and I know you don't know what those are, but it just for all of us feels very much that we're in the dark. We can't believe that there are not conversations going on and things. And I think that it is very difficult, but if you are in that group, there is 4 members of staff. There is a very small reorganisation now just being announced in FM. And again, the language that is being used by senior officers is this doesn't significantly have an impact on staff. There's 1 member of staff going to look likely to be made redundant out of that because it's one post is being deleted. But for them as individuals, that's very significant. So for a council to say that's not what we do, and I'm sure that's not what you mean by when you say we're just getting rid of jobs. And we know that there's change and there's always going to be change. We've, you know, for many of us, we've lived this change now specifically for the last, 12 years in austerity and things. So we've known about that. But if you're the person that has got the redundancy list, that is very, very significant. That is, you know, that is massive. And it is a concern to us. And it is noted by us, as Linda said, that many of the staff that are in that group would be showing up on your EDI list and things like that, because they are people, and the majority are Black.
And I think I'm right in saying, but I'm led to believe at this current time that we are not anticipating any whole-scale reorganizations. However, there may be some minor changes in some of the strategic directors' areas, probably not in adults and children, but maybe elsewhere in within the other strategic directors, but we have no details of what those minor changes may be to date. So
I've confirmed that we don't know either. So, you know, strategic directors are fairly new in, comparatively new in. They're taking stock, they're having a look. No one can guarantee there won't be further change, but at the moment, I am not aware of any there's no wholesale change planned. You know, we've had to sort out the strategic directors, and then, you know, once you do that, then your assistant director level isn't quite right. We've had to have a think about that. I think that is kind of, there'll be a period of settling down before anything further changes. And that's my understanding. So whilst it'd be great to have a crystal ball and be able to predict all this stuff, I don't think any of us have got one. So we wait and see. All I can say is that I know that there will be an effort from the HR and AD team to do it right. I hear what you said about the communication, and we'll feed that back. And you're right, the more people understand, the easier it is to get a grip of, but nobody likes change. It's kind of the fact of life. And I think the fact that we aren't looking at wholesale redundancies is not mass redundancies. I understand, and I don't underestimate the impact of an individual if they lose their job. Of course, that's horrendous, but it is a fact of life at the moment, and it is 1 as opposed to 9 or 10. So we're holding the line at the moment.
okay, thank you. Shall we move on to item 2, which is a Unison pay ballot? Obviously, everyone's aware that Unison are balloting our members, and the recommendation is to vote yes. I wanted to be very clear that this is not a dispute with the council, not with Ealing Council. It's a dispute with the national employers, which Ealing is part of, obviously, but it's also a dispute with central government, which is going to them, and that's one of the calls, which is making a joint approach to government to have properly funded local government, but also to have properly funded pay settlements, which they need to stump up the additional money for. So we are in the process of balloting our members for strike action. Our recommendation is from Unison is to vote yes. Other unions are equally going to be in the process of balloting their members as well. And obviously, we'd seek your support in this. We had asked for an email to go out, which Sue had tried to facilitate, so we thank her for that. But she was knocked back by comms from doing so. So we'd ask you to overrule comms and get that email through as members. So that's something that we would ask you to do. But I'll stop there because I know my colleagues have got further points.
Yeah, obviously, Sutminder's described it, as you say, we're 2/3 of the way through. We have the last sort of just over 10 days of our ballot. We will obviously, for people to understand, it's a disaggregate ballot, which is a very different ballot. So that means that it won't be national action. It will be individual employers. We have in Ealing about 13 different individual employers, because some of the schools are listed as individual employers and some will be part of the LBE. What the employer, as we're saying, is the whole and everything. We will obviously be back talking to you depending on the outcome of our ballots here locally about what that looks like and where that takes us. But we would really welcome this. So I've got a question. One, we'd really welcome if you would support the position that HR has helped us with, is that we can do one last push to get the information to as many of our members. And although we've been communicating with them directly on our email systems, as with all email systems and data systems, information is not always correct. And that's why we're asking for a notice to go out on the Ealing Council communication network that will be addressed to Unison members. So that means that people who do wish to read it don't need to read it, but we've got then an assurance that it's gone to every employee within LBE that is under that email system, and we'd really appreciate that. And my second bit was really to ask the employers, are you in a position to say, one, what you have budgeted for, what do you think that it is, and also what have you done about approaching the national employer on the basis of thinking that we should have an improved pay offer, or whether that is not, and what communication have you had with the national representatives of the employers to understand what that feedback is?
Okay, let me take it. So I think where are we all agreed? We are all agreed of the need for pay in local government and in other areas, but local government, because that's what we do, to be funded properly, to be funded in a way which enables councils to pay its people properly without that taking away from the council's ability to deliver the services that we employ the people to deliver. And at the moment, I think everybody surely recognises that we're caught in a vicious circle there, in that given the budgets we have, were we to increase what we paid significantly, we wouldn't actually be able to afford to deliver the services for those people to do. So that is the conundrum we face. I note and welcome, Chair, your reference that this is not a particular dispute or attack with the London Borough of Ealing. Having said that, in terms of Mary's point, I was surprised and disappointed to see all three unions take the approach of a disaggregated ballot, because I don't see how, in the end, that doesn't lead to a personalised, localised, individualised dispute. You're either going to take industrial action in the London Borough of Ealing, or you're not. If you do, you may or may not take it in the London Borough of Hillingdon, or the London Borough of Hounslow, or the London Borough of Harrow, or the London Borough of Brent. And I think it creates, simply by the organisation of the ballot and any potential dispute, it creates a localism in the dispute, which is, I think, both unnecessary and unhelpful. I don't think it's likely. I can't see circumstances in which it would be appropriate for the council to send an email of the type that you mentioned. In terms of budgets, I think the offer that's on the table from the national employer is clear, and we are signed up to the offer, and we'll pay the outcome of that offer. As Councillor Mason volunteered at the beginning of the last meeting, and it's in the minutes of the last meeting, he is a member of the committee of employer representatives. It's not a faceless bureaucratic body. It is a collection of representatives of council leaders who work together with officers to seek to establish what is affordable, given my original observation that we are keen, if we can, to achieve a joint way forward and reward our people appropriately. So this isn't a matter of there is a remote and distant employer who doesn't understand the reality on the ground. The people making these decisions collectively on our behalf are the people who understand things on the ground. And if we're the government to provide us with more money, I'm sure we'd be delighted to direct money towards an improved offer. We do recognise the impact over the years of the pay settlements that we've had. Recent settlements have sought imaginatively, I think, to target money at the lowest paid. That has knock-on effects, less so in London, but it's having an effect outside London in terms of where the bottom of pay scales are starting to rub up against each other, and differentials and reference points with the living wage and the national minimum wage are all being confused. So I think we're all ready, if we could do it, to pay more. We don't have the money to pay more. And that's the basis upon which I think the employers have been very clear in making the offer.
Thank you. I think it would be appropriate if we contact Peter Mason when he returns and ask him to make representations on the body that he's on, that he's currently on, because he did make the offer, that he could feed back to us in terms of what's happening there, and also feed up as well, we hope. I think we're done on that item. So should we move on to, sorry, Mary, go ahead.
I just, because I know that members of our branch committee specifically will want to know that. So just to be clear that you're refusing to have the email put onto the system.
In terms of this meeting, and I've not been aware of this request before, my response here is that I can't see that it would be appropriate. I'm happy to take that away outside the meeting, but I'm not saying that. In saying that, I wouldn't wish people to get an unnecessarily optimistic view as to whether I would change my mind in consultation with appropriate colleagues.
Just for confirmation, Peter and Deirdre were written to earlier this week to ask them directly, because we had been in communication, and it was only that we had it confirmed last week that the decision was no, and things like that was from the officers. So we have written. So I think that, I suppose we're asking for Peter or Deirdre to respond to our request directly and things like that. So I understand what you're saying, Steve. If you could please relay that back, that we would like a formal response.
Yeah, let's move on to item 3, schools. Mary?
I'm not going to say a lot, because obviously Danny isn't here, and Danny has all the information in his head, and does an amazing job and things like that. But there were 2 issues. One that has been raised previously, and we did get a response, but we're still concerned around the issues of all schools implementing the process of job evaluation, appropriate gradings of jobs, the appropriate role profiles for all jobs, and then the job adverts that go onto the council's website being appropriate. Because since the last time we've met, there has still been several incidences of schools advertising roles but have no connection with a correct grade. On the whole, when we raise it directly with the school, they will do something about it, but some schools refuse. They just say, well, I'm going to advertise it elsewhere. So it's not just the issue about advertising, it's the issue about why are we having schools getting away with having exam invigilators was one of the examples, and we have a complete range. So we have some high schools that are advertising exam invigilators below the London living wage, the real living wage, and some that advertise it above and things like that. And we need to somehow bottom this out and stop this. And then obviously, particularly the website was a concern. And it was my understanding, I wasn't at the last meeting, that Peter gave us a guarantee that he would ensure that the website could not advertise roles unless they met some certain standards. But I don't think that instruction has gone to the people who manage the website. And I think that they need to be made explicitly clear that they can say that to a school. We cannot advertise that role because it hasn't got an appropriate JD attached to it or whatever it is, and that we have that really clear. It has worked well over the last 6 months in the sense that we've had a really good officer within the recruitment team who has done really close monitoring, and she's done it really well, and she's worked with us, and she has told us when she's found the jobs, attempting to get onto the website, and she's made us aware. So it's not just us raising this, it's actually our officers is also raising it. She's unfortunately left Ealing now, and we haven't had clarity on whether another officer is going to take over that and going to continue to work with us to do that monitoring. We'll take that back to Mark Nelson and try and see where we can get that agreement from. But it's just really to highlight it again. And what do we do? I think that there needs to be something from the council to all schools, asking schools to be mindful that they are London Borough of Ealing employers. I'm going to mention it again when we get to the London living wage, which is the next item on the agenda, because we've got breaches of that. We have got schools that breach London living wage, and it really grates with us. We don't understand that. We don't understand why any school would be doing that, whether they are maintained, foundation, academy, whatever. They are part of the London Borough of Ealing family of employers, and they should be doing it appropriately. And then my other thing, if I raise the other thing as well, I just wondered if anybody had any update on the Maples Nursery School. I had actually been asking officers and I hadn't got a feedback, but we were really concerned that we heard that Ofsted was in last week or the week before, and they were given, so we were in originally 2 weeks ago, and they got what I believe is called a Section 5, where you get 5 days to get your act together, and if not, you're likely to requires improvement, if not worse. We understand there was some significant concerns raised about how safeguarding was managed within the school. We also know they've got significant financial difficulties within the school. Haven't been able to set a budget for a couple of years and things, so they've got significant concerns. But obviously, we are local government officers. We are concerned about that. It is where we don't want to see it academised. We don't want to see any of those issues come out. But also we're massively concerned about our members, because we have significant membership in there. Where does their future lie and things like that? So I was just wondering if you had an update on Maples.
Perhaps, obviously this is quite specific, so I'm just wondering if you want to go away and seek information and then come back to us outside of the meeting, Steve?
Well, I think, Chair, taking them in reverse order, if I did know anything of the type that was raised, I wouldn't discuss it here. I don't think it'd be appropriate if a school is in the middle of a conversation with Ofsted, they don't really need noises off in the Ealing Council Trade Union Joint Committee, make speculating on what may or may not be happening, even with the best will in the world and understanding, you know, there's obviously always there are all sorts of people with interests involved. So I think all I'd say is we'd have appropriate conversations with appropriate people at the appropriate time. On the other point, we remain committed. I doubt Peter would have guaranteed something like, he would have certainly given a commitment to seek to ensure, which is as much as a politician probably can do in these situations, but we remain committed to that. If people want us to advertise their jobs, they are going to be living wage compliant jobs. If things are still sneaking through the net, thank you for raising that, and we will seek to ensure that those holes in the net get closed.
Obviously, as I stated, let's have discussions outside the meeting as appropriate. Shall we move on to item 4, London Living Wage, update on implementation in social care provision, and obviously something that we've been pushing for some time, which is the signing up to Unison's ethical care charter. I know this is a big issue and it's a long issue and it's an expensive issue, but we'd like it done, basically. Is there an update?
Sorry, could I just add a question to that? So although when we originally put it in, it was around social care, because we've been raising the concerns around social care specifically. But I noticed that you kind of jumped the gun with us, because you put an article up to say to celebrate how well you were doing with the London living wage across the whole of the borough. I would welcome us having more of a discussion about that. And I guess, again, you're not likely to answer all of my questions here, but we would welcome knowing who all the employers are that have signed up to your commitment. Who are they? Because as a Unison branch, and I know if our GMB colleagues were here, we represent people who don't all work for Ealing. I know this committee is directly around Ealing employees. However, we do. So we would welcome knowing the names of all these employers. And then, so my sub question to that is, so we've raised at this committee several times about what are you doing with all of your contracted work, and are you assured that all of your subcontracted work are paying London living wage? Because it's our experience, and it's only through, you know, I haven't got 100% proof. I'm not convinced, for instance, in leisure, that they earn London living wage, or that they own you've dealt with the issue about the 0-hour contract and things like that, because that, as far as I know, has still not been dealt with. And I don't know that those are. And they're two of your quite significant contracts with leisure and parks and all of those bits and pieces. We know that GEL has agreed it. But, you know, how many of them are, and when is this list, which we asked for from some time ago, of all of your contracts, when are they up for renewal? So when do we know that the London living wage will be addressed and it will be clearly written into the contract going forward? Because it's great that you're doing the things across the borough, but we need to know the people that are delivering for the council, whether that is being addressed.
Okay. I'll see what I can do. I'm tempted an old hat on to move an amendment to your item 4 to insert at the beginning of item 4, real living wage brackets, formerly known as London living wage, close brackets, because I've been spending the last 2 years trying to get my head around the change of name. London living wage, kind of, you knew where you were, but the name now is real living wage. So I'm trying to get in the habit. We certainly did have an event only last week before, which we sought to celebrate our employers who pay the real living wage throughout the borough, private employers, employers of every kind, and also to seek to impress upon other employers who have an interest, the advantages for them of doing so. And in particular, we want employers to seek accreditation from the Living Wage Foundation. That they be accredited living wage employers. And of course, there are a lot of people who pay the real living wage, pay well above the real living wage, but they haven't sought that accreditation. And what we're trying to do is like it's peer group pressure, that within the employer community, people see that either, you've got the badge that says real living wage employer, or you haven't, and that begins to influence how other people, your potential customers, respond to you. And we're going to continue to do that work because obviously we're an important force in bringing all sorts of people together across the borough. As far as where are we committed to see it paid, we are committed to see it paid where anybody provides services to us. As far as leisure goes, when we renewed the tri-borough leisure contract last year, we took explicit and very complicated steps to ensure that anybody who delivers services under that contract for us is paid real living wage. Now, not all of the other two signatories, at least one of them, did not share that commitment. And that's why we engaged in these complex arrangements to ensure that for our people, it's going to be done. And in our procurement, we are putting in place tighter and tighter protocols to ensure that the real living wage is a sine qua non for dealing with the London Borough of Ealing. And it's going to remain so, but certainly for as long as this administration is in place.
Well, that's trying to think, how do I say that? So that would have been nice if somebody had told us that you'd done that in leisure, because that's not been communicated to us, that you renewed the contract, because it was one of the areas that we'd raised previously. And you did make the commitment that you said that every time you renewed a contract, but it would have been nice that people told us that that has happened. But we have direct links with those companies and everything. So it would have been useful for that to have filtered through to us, because then obviously we can do some of your monitoring for you. Because if we get somebody who comes to us and then they're attached to our branch, we're presuming that they're doing work within your borough, and then they say, well, I'm getting paid this because actually SLM are cooking the books, because they're saying, oh, well, I can attach them to the borough that doesn't commit that, but place them over there. You need to be aware of that, because we know that private companies operate in that way, and you need to be observant of that. I just wanted to say also, I had another example. I had this morning, I spoke to one of our members who doesn't work for the LBE, but works for one of the private nurseries. And she's earning £10.50 an hour. So you have notoriously masses of employers still that are not doing addressing this issue. And I suppose that's why it would be useful for us to understand which employers is, because then that would be great for me, wouldn't it? Because if I know what we've got a dozen nursery schools that are committed to it, then I'm going to be saying to people, well, you're better off going to looking for jobs there because you're going to earn a better rate of money there, rather than me saying, I don't go near any of them because they all pay badly and things. So,
Steve,
Well, in reverse order again, that's the purpose of the real living wage accreditation. It's a database people can consult to understand who the accredited living wage employers are within their community and more broadly, because obviously some of the national employers provide national services. As far as the latest contract goes, it went to cabinet. I mean, it was a cabinet paper, and I know they're not everybody's idea of bedside reading, and the broadcasts don't necessarily supplant the live Champions League football on a Wednesday night for some people. But I would have to say it would be unfair to say we kept it a secret because we conducted that business in public, advertised 8 days in advance.
I think it'll be, the suggestion is that we get the information of who has signed up and who has got accreditation, and that will be a very good starting point for everyone concerned to understand who is paying the real living wage and who is not, and what the plans are to try and cajole, encourage and support the employers who are not paying it the real living wage to get to pay it. Steve?
Yeah, just on the, 2 things. One, we'll see what we can do on that. And 2, let's just say to Mary, thank you for what you said about, you know, your ability to be spy on the cab for what's going on around the place. We certainly value that, and I didn't want to forget to say that. It is appreciated.
Councillor?
I just wanted to ask, do you actually take it on faith? If they say they're going to pay the living wage, do you just trust that they do it, or do you depend on the union to make sure they do?
When we require people to provide proof of what they do.
I don't think that's my view, is that there's lots of wiggle room on it, and there needs a lot of close monitoring on it. I do accept that it is really tricky when you are buying services that are across more than one London borough. We know the problem you had in residential elder people's care, but you know, how can you enforce a unit? But it's about something that people doing more and more towards it. I suppose, you know, my other question might be in connection with that is, so in the West London Alliance, are you really pushing it in that way as well? Are you really pushing that they should have a base of saying that there's, you know, are we really pushing the message out? But I do think that you do need to think about the monitoring, and I really appreciate that, because I think that that's an issue for us. The only time we've realised is when a member comes to us and we get into an issue around pay and we say, can you produce your pay slip for us so we can have a look? And you go, is that all you're earning? And then you realise, you know, I have another example, and I'm going to do some research before I say to you, but another is Minster Care, who is the provider in our 4 residential older people's units. I was led to believe by the staff who were 2p'd over to Minster Care that they still had living wage protected because they had a London waiting attached to their salaries, but only paid if they were at work. When they're on holiday, they don't get London waiting, and when they're sick, they don't get London waiting because they're not travelling. That's what the employer said. and everything. Now, I don't know whether that is still correct. Minster Care apparently have indicated that they are a real living wage employer. But I know that out of London, they don't pay that. Well, the last time I saw a job advert, because I know that they are offering national wage. But I'll do some more checking, but I think there is still a need for us to think about how we're monitoring this and how you're checking on it.
And perhaps it might be helpful to have the portfolio holder who has this responsibility to be present at any subsequent meeting that we have outside of this committee.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, don't wait for this meeting in order to bring information like that to the relevant service department. I'm sure they would be very, very keen to know as soon as you have it. And, you know, that this meeting's not really a business decision meeting. As far as West London Alliance is concerned, kind of what I said about the Tri-Borough contract applies. Yes, we do push. As things stand, the political makeup of the West London Alliance is no longer universally of a type which is necessarily sympathetic to the approach that we're talking about. So, but if we need to take individual steps, we need to take unilateral action to ensure that real living wage is paid, then that is what we will do.
Thank you. Shall we move on to item 5, cost of living initiatives? We know that there's been some recent stuff being put up on the intranet about some discounts and cards that individuals can access, employees can access, which is something we used to have some years ago. And yeah, we're going around the houses again, where it was taken away because of cost pressures in the past. But I know it's been introduced. Employees can get some discounts at various shops, etc., and some food places, as well as electrical places and other services as well. So those issues are welcomed. It's anything that can be put into place to assist people, employees, particularly during these very, very difficult and hard times. That's why we're which is a lot, and I recognize it's a lot, but it's a big ask, but that's what we're asking.
Just to say that Louisa McDonald is heading up the project to do that. We've just approved a whole raft of further benefits and also some communication to go out, and particularly to try and reach staff who don't have surfaces and mobile phones. So we just approved a budget to get messages out to them about what's available, which I think is good news. And we'll continue to build that portfolio of offers. I agree with you around, yeah, we should be providing access to, and actually that EAP, you can access all sorts of advice in supporting the cost of living issues through the EAP. And they actually, I think it's not as well used as it could be. So Good Shape, actually there's a lot of very good useful information on Good Shape about managing yourself through difficult times. So making people aware of those, and it's the communication which is at the root of it as well. So absolutely. You want to add to that?
Yeah, just on Good Shape, just to say they've introduced an app. It's totally up for individuals to sign up to that app if they wish, but there's a lot of useful information there that people can make use of.
Just for clarification, that app is completely voluntary, and it's because the way it's being communicated, or the way I've taken it, is that it's, if you wish to sign up to it, to register your sickness absence. But what you're saying is that it provides more than just that facility.
Yes, it is completely voluntary, and yes, you can use it to record your sickness absence. But yes, there's a wealth of other information which is there and tested with other employers to be a benefit for employees.
Anything else on this item, Mary?
Yeah, sorry, talking too much. So, couple of questions in the correction. So the ULEZ and things like that, has any research or anything being done on how that is going to specifically impact on employees within this borough as of the 1st of September or whatever date it is? We had guessed that as a borough, you were fairly supportive of it because you weren't part of any of the challenges and of our fairly green credentials we try to have in Ealing anyway. So we had presumed, but obviously it is going to have an impact. And so it's a cost of living impact, but it's going to have. And the other thing is, this goes back in history, but we're being asked to ask the question again about why Ealing is not listed as an inner London borough, but we're an outer London borough. But I have to remind you about the specific issue that we have in schools where teachers in Ealing are paid inner London waiting, and the support staff in schools are paid outer London waiting. They do get the very, very small £141 allowance as well paid to them, because that was not removed from the school-based staff, and the, all maintained schools still have to pay that. But that obviously doesn't compensate for that. So there is a real push for people, because people go, well, why is our London waiting set at that? It costs just as much to live in Ealing as it does to live, I don't know, Hammersmith and Fulham, the next borough down, and things like that. And why are we, and what are we doing as an employer to get that changed?
Right, I'm not aware, Sue may be aware, I'm not aware that we've conducted any particular research. Clearly, we'd want to, given our views on the climate crisis, we'd want our staff to be using public transport or active travel, various kinds, to come to work when they do attend the workplace. Ealing has always been a kind of hybrid borough. Both Yvonne and I live within the ULEZ as of today. So, you know, a lot of our residents are already within the ULEZ. And indeed, Kendall Ziziwas lives within the ULEZ. And so we're talking about an extension of something. You're right. We signed up to a letter from some council leaders in Outer London to the mayor, asking him to, if he could produce some improvements around the scrappage scheme and the like, which in fact the mayor promptly responded to. So there are improvements on that. And the other thing is, I think a lot more people will find they are exempt from the ULEZ expansion than realise are exempt, because far more cars are exempt than I think people understand. Even some much older cars still fall under the new limits. So we'd expect people, if people are using vehicles for us in the course of their work, of course, we won't expect them to bear any extra costs. I mean, that surely goes without saying. As far as philosophical debates about Ealing is inner London or outer London, I suppose if you go back our predecessors of 60 years ago, seeing the imminent emergence of the London Borough of Ealing, which was a matter of 11 months away, we were all of the constituent boroughs of what's now the London Borough of Ealing were outside of the London County Council area, which I guess, roughly speaking, is what has always constituted inner London. And while those of us who are, you know, if you represent East Acton, you see a clear, as I do, you see a clear parallel with the Shepherd's Bush area. But if you represent Northolt, clearly you're not viewing such a parallel. So Ealing has always provided great diversity between essentially strong inner characteristics and very much not inner London characteristics. So we've always had to operate within that space. But yeah, I think broadly speaking, we are an outer London borough.
So the answer is no. In essence, but I was interested in what you said in terms of if staff use vehicles for us, they won't have to bear any costs. So I didn't quite understand what that meant. Does that mean that the council is going to pay the £12.50 for people who use their vehicles per day in the discharge of their duties and responsibilities? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think if we require people to use their own vehicle, but there'll be very few circumstances in which we require people to use their own vehicle, I think. So there won't be a change to the arrangements that currently apply. We have people who currently live within the ULEZ, you know, so there are no, so if I've confused you, Chair, then I apologise. All I'm saying is nobody's going to lose out because they're employed by us. But you know, if somebody believes that they have lost out, then obviously they should go to their manager and talk about it. But I can't see it happening.
I'm still confused, but perhaps we'll talk outside this meeting. Yeah, it is because, yeah, I live in the ULEZ catchment. Our vehicles were not compliant, so it was very difficult for us, and yeah, got rid of the vehicles and got another vehicle, but it has put enormous financial pressure upon us. Yeah, I don't use a vehicle for council business, so yeah, it's on to me, which is different. But again, we'll have a conversation outside of this meeting. Mark, you indicated.
Yeah, just on this, are you aware that the council has vehicles that can't be driven from one side of the borough to the other at the moment? So, you know, where's the big plan there is, you know, for these vehicles to be replaced? People who use these vehicles, they're not going to be able to use public transport to get about. The vehicles are needed because sometimes they're off road as well.
I guess that's part of that will feed into the strategy in terms of the vehicles and the electrification of our vehicles or the green vehicles and the change of fleet, I imagine. But you know, it's down to the council to make the changes, not for us. Thank you. Shall we move on to the next item, which is, I guess this is just really, as it says there, an update on a refresh of policies and procedures. There's been ongoing work with Sue and people from her area in terms of looking at terminology and refreshing some policies and procedures which have become a bit out of date with the changes in legislation, wording, terminology, taking out he, she for replacing it with they, so making it more gender neutral, etc. So it's not root and branch, slash and burn review of these policies and procedures. I'll hand over to you, Sue.
Yeah, there's a two-staged approach on this project. We've got additional resource that I've brought into the council to work alongside some existing resource that we've diverted, because the council's policies haven't really been looked at A good practice would say that every year you do a sense check through your policies and you check them for updated legislation, you check them, you make sure that they're current. We've done a very quick, and we're in the process of doing a very quick refresh, which is to do those surface things that mean that actually, yes, the language is right. They now match current legislation. We've brought them up to date. We're looking at language. The next stage of that project will be a full review in priority order of the council's major policies. And there are 66 of them, which actually is far too many. So no, there's no slash and burn of any terms and conditions, but I think there's an opportunity to harmonize, to streamline, to strip them out and make them more accessible, simpler, easier to use. One of the things that I know that managers struggle with is understanding and implementing policy. Well, let's make those policies more modern. Let's recognize that we operate in a very different world from 2012, and that we are looking to make sure that our policies recognize the fact that we employ adults, recognize the fact that most of our employees actually want to do the right thing. And we need to, because we've got into the stage, I think people do get into the stage of writing policy for the what if. We want to move away from that. We have no intention of denigrating, removing, or otherwise tampering with terms and conditions. So this isn't about that. So this is about simply helping us to have more modern looking policies, which are based more on toolkits. It's easier to use. We'd really like to get to the point where we've got HR policy on a page. I think that's quite ambitious. And in some cases, we may have to go to 2 pages and maybe some in 4. But my view is that when I look at Ealing's policies and I compare them with policies I've seen in other authorities, they look quite unwieldy and a little bit overwhelming. So that's the work that's underway. The plan is, of course, and I know that you and I have talked about this, both Minya and Mary, we want to work with you to do that. So we want to gather ideas and work in a very collaborative way to do this. We're not about negotiating line by line because we're not changing things, but it is about making sure the policies are right and they reflect us as a compassionate and good employer. And that's what we want us to look like, a good employer.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it is on record. We really appreciate the approach that you have gone down. It is what we would want. It's how we like to work, rather than for us to comment as after the case. It's better for us to comment and tell you how things work and how things don't work from our perspective and things. So we really appreciate that. So I do think that it's important that it's recorded on record, that's what we've got that as an agreement, and that we're all happy to work along those lines. So yeah.
I think it'd be helpful for us if we supply the policies, procedures that we've updated thus far, so that it's on record, so we have an audit trail for these policies and procedures to have been agreed, reviewed and agreed going forward. So we'll supply that to Keith. Yeah, thank you. Moving on to item 7, we're coming close to the end here, which is inequality update. Is there an update at all?
I can do that. Work continues around action planning right across the council. I know that Samantha Whittick has been doing work with each of the directorates. There are now directorate action plans in place. There's a corporate action plan. And we're driving a lot of work. We're actually really pleased with the way that the staff equality groups are coming together. I think it was particularly pleasing, their role and involvement in the recruitment of strategic directors. I think that sends a message that we are really interested in employee voice, that we're interested in what these groups have to say and their contribution. We continue to work with them, particularly in policy development. So we were very grateful to the women's group, for instance, for helping us in terms of developing the menopause policy. We'll continue to work with them in the best way possible. And we're challenging all the time that kind of way in which we work. There's some funding now available to do more sustained work around equality, diversity and inclusion. And I think we're gradually seeing a more diverse set of results coming out of interviews. We've got diverse interview panels. We're able to demonstrate that we put equality, diversity and inclusion at the heart of our recruitment campaigns. And I think that there's work going on across the workforce to help people feel that they are able to show up as their whole self, that people are, you know, able to bring themselves to work and contribute fully without fear of any kind of discrimination or unpleasantness. So we're making progress. It's slow progress and we want to do better. But also the Corporate Equalities Board, you know, I think is a good experience for people. It's becoming a very useful place to have those discussions. We're talking about things like language, about how we do things. So I think there's good progress across, more to do, of course, but it is going absolutely in the right direction.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, going back in history, we used to have an equality report that used to come here that gave us the real detail of numbers of, you know, what our workforce was made up of and things like that. I'd like to request that we go back to having that, because I think that that's our role. I think our role is to understand your data and give you constructive feedback on that, on the basis that we know that you have separately have the groups for staff to comment a lot of that. So I'd like to request that. I'd also like to request in connection with this, I haven't sort of, but I know that the chairs of the groups meet. And although from a trade union point of view, we were heavily involved in some of the big conversations and all of those things, we kind of feel that there's an element that we're excluded from that. So we don't know what is going on, what the groups are feeding back. The only reason we would know what the groups are feeding back is if we're part of a group or ourselves as individuals and we can choose to be part of those groups. So I put it forward already. I've never had the feedback, but I'm putting forward again that is it possible for a trade union rep to also be a member of the chairs group so that we understand how and what that is delivering and what that's not delivering, so that we understand how those conversations. And I just wanted to, I put it on record now that Unison has decided we're going to reform our Unison Black members group. And the reason for that is that this year is year of the Black workers in Unison. So it's a significant year and we're going to be doing lots of work around our members and trying to get that. So we will be coming to the employer and asking them to support, because we're going to have we're going to run a function, we're going to do something, you know, where we encourage all of our Black members to come forward and things like that. And reminding everybody that Unison's term Black is with a capital B, and it is inclusive of anybody who is not white. That is its definition, that's its diversity. It is for anybody that defines themselves in that way, and we will be pushing that again this year.
I think anything that we do that promotes those kind of issues is good news, I think, for Ealing. In terms of membership of the staff equality groups, I think that's a matter for the chairs. So I think we'll have that conversation with them and see and get their views around what that might be like. I mean, I think again, there's nothing stopping you joining as a member, of course. I know that you are members of some of those groups. I think for us to formally say we want to have a union member on there is not for us to do. I think we need to. I believe that they have autonomy, and we'll talk to the union. We'll talk to the chairs about that. I think. I agree with you. I think it's right. Certainly, we've had discussions, you know, at Corporate Equalities Board about the terminology that we use, and the group themselves have decided that they are the Black, Asian, and multi-ethnic group. And that's the terminology that they want to use, and they want us to define it in those full terms. So I think you're right, defining that B, capital B for Black is right, and welcome that. So good effort.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to item 8, wellbeing and mental health. Do you want to jump in, Sue?
So one of the things that I commissioned whilst I've been in Ealing was a review of health and safety. Because I didn't feel that corporate health and safety had got a strong enough focus around the workforce well-being element, health, safety and well-being. They tend to focus on safety, which is obviously right and proper, but I think there is equal focus. We know, flexible working, the new working arrangements all bring stresses of their own. And therefore, I think that there should be. So I've asked the corporate health and safety to work on a health, safety and well-being policy. And that will come under the new HR director who actually starts on Tuesday. So Kim Brown arrives in Ealing on Tuesday. And one of the things that are in my handover to notes is to her will be to pick that up. I think it's a really important thing that Ealing is looking after people's mental health and well-being. I think that, again, I think we underuse Good Shape recently, and it might be worth, I'm thinking actually, Andrew, it might be worth whether or not the trade union side would welcome an opportunity to hear from Good Shape firsthand a lot of the really good stuff that they offer. I mean, the amount of stuff that's on the app, the amount of stuff that Good Shape offer that we don't make any use of, I think would be worth looking at and pushing that again around that.
Yeah, just on that, if I just remind you, it's probably been a couple of years, but when we had service review meetings with Good Shape, you were invited, you attended, and I think I'll let you comment, but I think you found them useful in the end.
Yes, no, certainly. Obviously, it's no fault of anyone's that we went through the pandemic and those meetings kind of fell off of the cliff edge. It'd certainly be helpful to have those meetings again, because obviously within Good Shape, there are different initiatives and new initiatives and whatever, and it'd be helpful to understand what those are. And also this whole issue of waiting to talk to the nurse, for example, or not wanting to talk to the nurse because you've already seen your GP, etc. So it's all of those intricate issues that need to be thrashed out and ironed out.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I would plug the app, because the app deals with that issue of talking to a nurse or talking to a nurse at a prescribed time.
But let's wait for that meeting to take place, yeah, and then we'll have that discussion. Mary.
Yeah, just a couple of points. Welcome that we're having a review of health and safety and well-being and things like that. And yeah, I think it's massive and things, and it is very frustrating. You know, just think of an example of, we were at a recent health and safety meeting in one of the directorates, which you might guess by my terminology when we get there. And we looked at the figures, and we looked at, what people's reasons for absence, and rightly so, it's on the health and safety thing. The top reason for absence was musculoskeletal, which you understood because this was a group of frontline staff, and you go and the second one, which was only just below it, was mental health and well-being. And I said, and we were sat there and everybody talking, and nobody made a comment. And I said, what I find it really frustrating, we're sitting here looking at figures and nobody's commenting on what is glaring you. Yes, we expect musculoskeletal. That's not to say that it should happen, but you understand when you do care work that is likely to be a knock-on. You do manual handling, that is what's going to happen. But the other thing is mental health. And what I was asked the question there at that meeting, and I wasn't get over a clear answer, so you may be able to answer it, Andrew, is how much of that mental health is listed as work-related or not work-related? Because we need to look at those figures, and we need to start accepting and acknowledging how much this has an impact on people and what every department is doing. So it's almost like, now we've got our equality action plans, we need to have well-being, mental health action plans in all our departments, because people need to understand and acknowledge this has such an impact on people going home from work exhausted and crying. And I'm not somebody that says no to any of our members, but I am not their counsellor. I should not be the person that they cry to when they're exhausted and they don't feel that anybody's listening to them. But that happens so many times. And it then gets very frustrating when the director says, oh, we don't have any problem with our workload because we've had it assessed by somebody. And I go, well, I'm pretty sure if you put a group of social workers in a room, I don't think any of them are going to say, I've got a good workload. I've got very good, because nobody does. Nobody in local authority work has a good workload. Everybody is overworked. Everybody has too much. And we have to learn how to do those things. So I really welcome this. The only thing I ask is, please, Sue, before you leave, because you have really communicated well with us and you have made us feel that you want to talk to us, can you please roll that to health and safety and say to them that when they're starting to draw this policy up, they need to be talking to us now? Because when I asked them the question, they said, oh, Mary, it'll be on SharePoint. And I thought, you've missed the point. Because if you're telling me it's already on SharePoint, that means that you weren't going to consult with us or talk to us about our concerns and views that we have about what is important and what's not. So I would appreciate that.
Okay, and that draws us to the end of our committee meeting. So thank you very much. It only leaves me to say, from a trade union side and also from a council side, because I'm chairing this, which is thank you very much, Sue, for your work and your contribution to the London Borough of Ealing. It's made a difference. It really has, because it's been open communication. We may not have agreed on everything or seen eye to eye on things, but nevertheless, we continue to talk in a polite and constructive manner on both sides. So thank you very much. And also we wish you the very best with your future endeavours. So thank you. And I'm sure that Councillor Donnelly would like to confirm what I've just said.
I wouldn't thank you, Chair. Sue came to us at what you might call a lively point in our history, and picked up the gauntlet really effectively. So we're saying, oh, thank you, welcome. Please recruit us 6 strategic directors and your own successor. And could you have that done by, week after next, please? Or it must have felt like that, I'm sure, at various times. But the calm authority with which Sue has dealt with the organisation and with its most frenetic components, the members, senior members, has been absolutely impeccable. And I share your good wishes and my personal thanks for Sue's support to me over the course of the last few months.
Thank you, Sue. Yes, of course.
I'd just like to thank you to Ealing. Thank you for having me, really. It's always a sort of a gamble as an interim, isn't it? Someone says, could you come along and help us for 3 months? And 18 months later, you're still there. So you never know quite when you get out. But actually, I've really enjoyed it. I've had a lovely do actually in the office today, and very touched by some of the comments that have come back to me. So I've appreciated it, but I have felt very welcome in Ealing. I have a lot of real confidence that Ealing is facing the right way and going the right way forward. And I'm confident the unions are part of that. You and I, when we first spoke, my absolute belief is that unions and management want the same things. I want a fair deal for the workforce. I want our workforce to feel safe and happy and included. And I know you want the same things. And I think that I'm greatly optimistic about the future. Kim, my successor, has been recruited. She's talented. She is an Ealing resident, which is great. And I think she'll work in a very similar, open and collaborative way. And I think good luck to you too. And thank you for your support as well. So mutually felt. Thank you.